What is going on, guys? Welcome to your third lesson in how to build a Java stock market analyzer program. And in the last tutorial, we built a little method to check whether that file was actually a file or not. So let's go ahead and add a little comment to tell us what our methods does. And it pretty much says check if the file is a file. And now I just like to add a little comment above each one of my methods just to tell what they do. So now we have this method built. We can actually test this return value in our next method. So we're going to be building a method now that pretty much finds the number of rows in our CSV file. So let's go ahead and put find number of rows in CSV file. And now we can go ahead and begin building another method. Now this method is going to return an integer depending on how many rows. So it's going to return 20 hopefully, because this DAO file has 20 rows in it. So let's go ahead and put public int, since it's going to be returning an integer, find row number. So I'm going to name my method find row number because that's what it does. So now what we need to do is, first of all, we have this variable called row up here, and it's set to 0. And what we want to do is set it to 0 again right here. And this is because if we call this method twice, at the end, hopefully this row is going to be set to 20. And then if we call it somewhere else from our program, we don't want it to be set to 20 when it starts again. We want it to be set to 0 every time. So that's why we need to reset it to 0, even though we set it to 0 up here. We can actually probably put this in here, but if we need this row elsewhere, just set the row equal to 0 in here. That's what I'm saying. So now that we have the row set to 0, what do we want to do? Well, the first thing we want to do is check if it's a file or not. So if this is true, and how can we do this? If check is file. And what this is going to do is hopefully return true. And it's only going to do this bit of code. Do this if it's a file. There we go. So we're going to have an if-else statement. If it is a file, which hopefully it is, we want to do this bit of code that we're going to program in about 5 seconds. Else, if it's not a file, let's just go ahead and give them an error message. So system out print line, and let's go ahead and print like this is not a file. So hopefully we're never going to be receiving this message right here. The only time we're going to be receiving this message is if they selected a file that wasn't a file. So this is a nice little kind of custom exception handling we just built, just because if we mess up in our program somewhere, then we get a nice little prompt. But now let's get to the good stuff. What do we want to do if it is a file, which it should be, by the way? Well, the first thing we're going to want to do is put a try catch statement in here. And we're going to want to do this because we're going to be working with files, and anytime you're working with files, like reading them, you usually want to try catch in there. So let's go ahead and build that catch right now. So catch, just catch all exceptions, exception E, and let's go ahead and put something like system out print line E. And if you don't know what any of this is, then I recommend going to my Java tutorials in my main page, and then you'll understand what everything I'm doing right now. But if this is too advanced for you, then go check out my basic Java tutorials. But all you other guys who suffered through my other Java tutorials, you should know what all this means. So now we put a try and catch statement. So it first checks if it is a file, and then if it is, it's going to try to do this code. So what do we want to put in here? What we actually want to put in here is we need a way to read that file. So what we're going to have is something called buffered reader, and this is a built-in class in Java, and I'm going to name my reader reader. And this is pretty much how you read files in Java. It's one of the many ways. And I'm going to set it equal to new buffered reader, hopefully I didn't mess up, and as your parameters you need to type new file reader and put the file name in here. And remember, we don't have to type the whole directory because we stored it in this nice little variable right here. So instead of writing this whole thing, we have the privilege of just writing file right here. So this reader right here is pretty much going to allow you to read your file. And if you're wondering where this stuff came from, buffered reader and file reader, these are built-in classes in Java that allow you to read files. How nice of them to put them in for us. So what we're going to do is read through each line of the file, and each time we get to a new line, we're going to increment this row counter. So how do we do that? Really easy. Just make a simple while loop and put this while, let me move my cursor out of the way, reader, not redder, reader dot read line, can't type today, read line, and put is not equal to null. And what this is pretty much saying is, alright, this read line, by the way, method is built into Java, and this pretty much reads your file line by line using this reader object that we just built. And what this is pretty much saying, alright, if we get a line and it's equal to something, it's pretty much not empty, what do we want to do? Well, what we want to do is just take that row variable and increment it by 1. So in essence, here's what I'm saying. If you have one line in your file that's not empty, we're going to say, alright, this row is equal to 1. If you have 10 files, or excuse me, if you have 10 rows in your file, this counter is going to be equal to 10. If you have 20, which we should be getting, this counter is going to be equal to 20. So this is a really simple way of counting the rows in your file. And again, we're going to need to count the rows in order when we create our array, we need to tell it how big to make our array. So the last thing we need to do is, since we promised Java where we're going to return an integer variable, is, let me figure out where the end of my method is. Right there. Let's just go ahead and put return row. So what this is going to do is pretty much count all of the rows in your file and then return that variable. So now if we go ahead and I forgot the name of it already, find row number, let's just copy that because I'm lazy, paste, we're going to print out the row number, and now if we run this we should get 20. Come on, no whammy, no whammy, bam, look at that, 20. So we pretty much just printed the return value of that find row number. So let me explain to you guys one last time what that means so there isn't any confusion. We built a method called find row number to find the pretty much row number. Don't need to explain that part, but I did. The first thing we did is set the row equal to 0 in case somewhere else in our program later down the line we messed it up somewhere. We checked if that file we were looking at is actually a file, and this should return true all the time. If it is, we pretty much tried this code right here. Again, we shouldn't be getting it. This is just errors down here. We pretty much read that file. This reads the entire file. This reads line by line, and every time we got the new line, we incremented that variable by 1. So since it had 20 lines, that is the value it returned at the bottom, 20. So that is why it printed out 20 right here. So now that we got that number 20 of rows, whenever we create an array, we know how big to make our array. How awesome is that? And again, we don't have to even figure out how many columns to do it because there is always 7 columns in that file. So this is it's getting a little too easy. That's the only problem with this program right here. So make sure you have your code just like mine, or if you're just watching for fun, just listen to me talk, just watch. But in the next program, we're going to be taking this file and data that we just got, and we're going to be building our array. So thank you guys for watching, and don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you next tutorial.